we're basically iterating towards a Oracle standard. Not iterating towards it, we have a standard and we're iterating the standard to grow it more and more. So for anyone that doesn't use or hasn't been introduced to REST fully, it's pretty open. You know, you have URLs, you hit those URLs, you get a result. What that result looks like varies by mileage, right? Everyone has their own individual take on it. The nice thing here is from Oracle's stance, if you use our version of REST, if you use Fusion Apps version of REST, if you use middleware version of REST, they should all look and act the same. So if you know how theirs works, you know how ours works, and vice versa. So for anyone that doesn't know what REST is, representational state transfer, it's abbreviation, of course. The important things here are, if you look at the two gets, so the second bullet's down, right? You're basically using the URL part as a noun if you think in language, grammatically, or syntax, and you're doing a verb on that, so you're getting employees. So you don't mix verbs over in the URL part itself, right? So the next one down, you're getting the HTTP verb, you're doing a get. You're not going to get all employees. You just do the first one and you get a list of employees. And then you go into the HTTP spec, and we'll demo these, but there's all the different different variations on the verbs, right? So you can do a get, which means you read it. You do a post, put, delete for all your insert, update, deletes, things like that. And then we'll talk about this too and demo this more importantly is it's all about linkability. So if you get a list of employees, there should be a link to go and get their department that they come from, and so on and so forth. So to break those verbs down a little bit, right, there's a get, and it's to retrieve in the database operation on the far right, so you're doing a select. The head and the options we'll come back to, but basically those are selects, those are very safe things. Then you get down into the bottom three where you put, delete, and post. A put is if you think of an update statement, you're going to put in changes to a record. Delete's fairly obvious, and post, again, fairly obvious. You're going to insert a new record. And we'll do demos of all these as well. So I don't know if people are using the chat window. If you have any specific questions, you know, post it to that chat window. We can address them as they come up. But for anyone that doesn't know ORDS specifically, right? So ORDS has been around for a while now. It's a mid-tier application, so it's written in Java. It itself pushes everything to the database. So all of our metadata is in the database. Everything's very declarative, stored in the database. The new version of ORDS has full PL SQL APIs for defining any REST point you want. So before you had to go through SQL Developer, or you had to go through Apex, and you had to point and click your way through. There was a couple options in there for exporting to, in the SQL Dev side, to an XML file, or on the Apex side to a SQL script. But now it's just a standard PL SQL API. So you could, for example, write SQL generating SQL, right? You could write a SQL plus script that iterates over, say, a list of objects and generates a REST for each individual one. Not that you do that, because we'll come back to that. Very JavaScript friendly, obviously, because it's returning JSON and it's all HTTP, so it's very easy to use. The newer things, which I guess we'll probably do in a future session, is the JSON collections. So for anyone that's on the latest, greatest of the database, 12.102 plus a patch, they have JSON support in the database, which is very nice because you can write SQL joining into JSON documents with JSON notation. So you can use, you know, data.employee.firstname to walk that JSON element. You can use square brackets to get the third employee in the record. You can do all that stuff. There's also NoSQL support. So if anyone has been using Oracle NoSQL or is interested in Oracle NoSQL, prior to ORDS supporting them, they only had Java APIs. So now there's RESTful access as well. And then, of course, where it all started from. We continue to support the OA toolkit and anything that Apex needs to run as best as we can. We renamed it, so if anyone's confused, it used to be called the Apex Listener. Now it's REST Services. The reason for that is that's where all of our, not all, but the majority of our efforts are is in RESTfully enabling the database, as opposed to it originally started with the emphasis was on enabling Apex. So there's a quick history. It's been around for almost 5 years now. The things that we've added, right? The interesting things is 1.0, it was all based on XML files. 2.0, we integrated with Apex and started using their repository. 3.0, we've split from Apex in terms of a repository, and we'll talk about that too. But now, if you are not an Apex shop, you can still use ORDS, and you don't have to install Apex at all. So in a nutshell, the URLs come in, we rip them apart according to what rules people put in, we turn them into SQL with appropriate bind variables, we execute that, we transform it, and we ship it back out. So at the high level, it's very simple. So if this allows me, we'll come in and we'll just look at a simple example. I can find my tab. A simple example that will go into a bigger example. So in SQL Developer or in Apex, from Apex you go into the SQL Workshop, then RESTful Services. Those RESTful Services are organized into modules. So in here we have modules. In SQL Developer you see the exact same thing. You come into RESTful Development. From the View menu, you say View, REST Data Services Development, and you get a list of the modules. You can click on those modules and go into editing the SQL directly. In Apex, exact same setup. You come into the modules. We're going to look at our examples. We're going to look at this cursor test. In here, we start building up the URL. So this URL is what ultimately turns into how it's accessed. So the module itself has the initial piece of the URL. Then we'll come down to an individual template within there. And then that template has the next piece of it. And then here we're going to have a GET request. So it's going to be examples / cursor test name equals. The important part here is this name is in curly brackets. Let's see. This name is in curly brackets here. What that denotes is that we will turn that into a bind variable. So here we're just going to select the table, and then we'll come back to what this is doing after. And then we're using the bind variable for the name, and we're doing a select. So here we didn't pass a name in. We're just going to say emp. So here's where we get our table. So we typed in a SQL statement. We gave it a notion of how to split this URL apart to do a bind variable, and then executed that select statement. So now the interesting part here is what happens with this cursor command. So this cursor command exists in the database. It's been there forever. You can actually take this over into SQL Developer normally, plain old SQL Developer. Our table name equals emp. And what happens over here is basically these cursor declared functions are exactly what you'd expect. They're cursors. So in SQL Developer, we actually open those up and show you. There's that cursor within the outer select. So in RESTful, it's no different. We take that same cursor function and we expand those out. So what this full REST call is doing is It's getting us our table, it's getting our list of columns, and also the list of indexes. So the reason to show this is instead of always having flat JSON structures coming out of the database, you can have them as deeply nested as you want. So if you wanted a RESTful endpoint that shows you your departments with employees all in one JSON document, you can do that very simply using database features that are already there. So the only thing special we're doing is we recognize this cursor command, and we actually pull those out and nest that document for you. I can't. So here's just a more explicit example. So the employees, we define the 10 to be a bind variable. We select from the emp table where the department number is 10, and we return that out. So REST services, it runs in WebLogic, Tomcat, or Glassfish, and it also has a standalone HTTP embedded listener, which allows you to start it straight from the command line. You just type java-jar, the war file, and it starts it up. It will ask you and walk you through exactly what you need to provide it. For example, what directory to store the configuration in, what the database connections are, what the username passwords are, and it will actually auto-detect if it's been configured before. And if it has, then great, there's nothing more to do. If it has not, it will continue on and configure itself. This is new with 3.0. With 2.0, you have to reference the Apex install guide, and there's a script you have to run there called ORDS, Apex REST config. And then that will set it up on that side. This new installer will also take care of any upgrades. So when we come out with 3.1 or 3.0.1 or whatever it is, it will automatically upgrade itself the next time you start it. So here's just another example of that cursor function, a more realistic one. So here we've got the customers, and we want to know the orders within the customers. You could obviously take it a step further and actually use the cursor command within the orders and then get the order items within it. You can carry it as far as you'd like. Another example, the exact same thing. So the reason that we're so focused on REST is REST is pretty much universally accessible from any language. I don't know that anyone's told me a language they cannot access a RESTful call from. These are just some obviously simple examples. You know, the base JavaScript XML HTTP is there. A Java example using a default client that's from Apache. It's a very nice little library that wrappers everything up for you. And then if you don't want to deal with raw JavaScript, there's also always tons of helper functions. For example, jQuery. There's Python examples, PHP, Ruby. Like I said, I'm pretty sure it's universally accessible from any language. If anyone knows of a language that's not accessible, can't call a REST call, let me know, and I'll stop saying that. So the other benefit of RESTfully enabling everything is the plethora of JavaScript libraries out there. There's a library for everything. So if we look at this example, all we have is a HTTP call that gets a number of sessions, and it plots it. And literally all it is this little bit of HTML on the left and this little bit of JavaScript on the right, then a chart pops out. Very easy to do this. So let me give you a better example. So here is when you sign up for Oracle Database as a Service, if you go out to cloud.oracle.com and sign up, one of the things you get inside that database service when you sign up is a dashboard. This dashboard is completely REST-based. So everything in here is completely based off ORDS. It gives you a quick overview. If we look at what's happening, if I don't mistype things, we can see here we're coming down, we're executing our top. We get our preview. Here's the XML that's coming out of it. Not XML, sorry, JSON. Here's the JSON that's coming out. So there's where our weights are. And then we simply use Angular, some D3 charting, and turn that into this weight event that's up here. So the overhead is very small because ORDS is running inside of Glassfish. We have the SQL defined, which just gives us our current weight statuses or weight numbers, weight metrics, and we query those. To be a more complex example, here's an example of a chart written in Rickshaw. And we take the exact same thing, plot them, but if we look at the RESTful call, it's no different. It's, here's the time interval, the CPU.
Hey Chris, I don't think your screen's updating. I still just see the monitor page and then some stuff behind it.
Do I need to unshare and reshare then maybe?
You can try wiggling your Mac, or you could unshare and share.
All right, I hit share again. It seems to have, oh, now WebEx tells me I'm no longer connecting. It's reconnecting. All right, so I'll be there in a minute. But, oh, and a lot of people dropped off, unless it's just me. WebEx is reconnecting, so I'll be right back. But the idea is that very simply, through exactly how we did the emp table there, or the table with the list of columns, we can do the same thing on any select statement anywhere in the database. And our database as a service monitor screen is just an example of that, where all we're doing is we're looking at normal weight events, we're writing the select statements to get that back out, and plotting that. Now it totally took me out. And we're doing that across the board for lots of things within there. So weights is just one example. We have storage in there where, you know, we're at the core of it, we're just going down to DBA data files, and we're looking at how big the database is. You need to re-grant me, I guess, to share, Jeff.
I think you should be able to share already.
No, it just has an option to share file. Oh, share screen. Okay, maybe. Can you see it again?
It's thinking about it. There you go. You're live.
Okay. So this screen is nothing more than a bunch of select statements on various data dictionary tables. $sessions over here for sessions, weight events, database files. The database status is as simple as select one from dual. If that fails, you know, chances are the database is down. The alerts is, we found there's a $$ table, which actually has the alert log itself there, so we don't have to go parse the alert file. And from there, we can drill down. This is what I was trying to show when WebEx died. We can come into the weight events. We can give, through getting the data over REST, we can use standard things like tables and grids and pictures, So we can take that data and we can present it any way, shape, or form that, there's a JavaScript library for. It doesn't obviously have to be limited to read-only. Here we can come in and we can actually change the database functions. We can say, I want a 351 cursors instead of 350. Right? We go through our little dialogues, and at the end of the day, it executed an alter command to change the cursors. So that's just an example of how we're using it and using it for the cloud. All right, so now we'll go into a few more examples. So one of the new things for 3.0 is the ability to automatically RESTfully enable a table. So when you're in SQL Developer, if you right-click on a table now, if we right-click on a table, there's a RESTful service enablement. If we come through here, we say we want to enable the table. We'll do an entire Wednesday on nothing but security, so we'll come back to that, but basically you can secure them. We'll say we want to name this the same name as the table. Some people don't want their table name directly exposed, so we can change that to anything. You can come down and see the actual PL SQL that's happening on the back end. So here we're just ORDS enable object, nice and simple, nice and easy. And we're making sure that my schema itself is enabled as well. So you can blanketly turn a schema on or off. Not blanketly on, but you can turn it off, in which case none of the follow-on dialogues. If at the schema level it's turned off, you can't expose an individual table. But using our wizards will enable that for you. If we go through here, then we're RESTfully enabled. So now if we look at our RESTful objects, here's our EMP. What did I name that one? ABCXYZ. There's our ABCXYZ, the one we just enabled, and there's all the data from it. We'll go back to EMP because I actually practiced this demo. So here we'll see that we're doing a get on the employees table. So we're getting all the records in there. This is where we come into that Oracle REST standard. There's going to be a section in there for links, and this is a link to this element within the array. So within the array, every element in the array needs to have a link back to itself. So here we're going to look. Obviously it comes back, it passes the key, we get just that record. Here back to that REST standard, there's going to be a few extra flags, like what are your pagination. Obviously on a singular record it doesn't make as much sense, but then you get into the same exact thing. So there's a describe, there's the first record for if you're on a more lengthy results. So you can go back to the first, you can go to the next, you can say described. So we'll look at the describe real quick. So here, off of the metadata catalog for our objects for EMP, it will tell us what the columns are, what the primary keys are, and then obviously the link back to itself. If we go to the back to just metadata catalog, it actually shows us all the tables that we've enabled. So there's our XYZ, there's our EMP, and I did a products one as well. So there you can go straight over to the products table, same kinds of things. So that's fine and dandy. We can look at the read-only version. So now if you want to create new records, so here we have our EMP, and we're going to shrink my screen so I can see it all. So the trick here, not really trick, but the key here is we're going to post a new record for employee 1010. Let's, oh, the wrong one. Where did it go? Oh, I lost my demo. Hold on for 1 second. We'll go back and we'll take a real example. So we'll look at the raw source here. Let's take our Smith employee and we will give him a raise. So if we come over here, we're going to put that actual raw JSON in there. We'll say his salary is 8,801. And then we'll come down to our links and we'll grab the edit link. And we'll put that in for our target. This client I'm using is just one that's in the Chrome application store. Now the trick here is you have to make sure you set the content type. So you have to set it to application JSON so that we know what's happening. So now this JSON is going to come in. We're going to do a post. We're going to see results of 0 records inserted, right? So if we go back to the verbs, the post was going to be for an insert, right? If we do a put, we'll see that we didn't insert anything, but we updated the record. So now if we go back to, say, SQL Developer and look at our records, his salary is now 801. So all we did is right-click in SQL Dev, say hook my table up, and we can query it and get all the results out of it. We can edit the records. If we say we want to make a 1002, I think I took 1001, and make a new record of rice. Now if we go ahead and do a post, it won't work. Why didn't it insert? Thanks, clerk. Well, it should insert a new record unless there's a foreign key or a trigger or something like that blocking it. So I don't know what happened there. I'll look at that and I'll put it on my blog, see what happened there. But that should allow you to insert records, update records. Obviously, we can then turn around and delete the records. So then, oops, just to pick up off of here. So the reason that we're doing all this in SQL Developer is we have basically 4 million users. So chances are most people are using or have used or have it sitting there SQL Developer, so they can right-click and RESTfully enable things very, very simply where they're already doing work, where you're already doing work. Here's a different example of our PL SQL API. So we can publish our module. We can say /examples/employees, how many items per page, and you can actually put in the select statement right there directly. So again, you could script so that you can repeatably create RESTful endpoints and deploy them. So we kind of briefly talked about these curly brackets. The curly brackets are for bind variables. Anything you put between the curly brackets will be translated into a bind variable. This may be changing for 3.0 to be colon-based, so it looks exactly like a bind variable in the URL even. That will obviously be heavily noted if that changes. Another example is passing in our a JSON. If we do a put, post, delete, and we send it to application JSON, just like we did a minute ago, then everything in that JSON is turned into a bind variable. So the catch here is we don't deal with nested JSONs. So if you're trying to pass in ename Chris and a phone number array, you're going to have to process that array yourself. So there's bunches or a few choices for doing that. There's a PL/JSON open source library out there. The Apex team is putting together a JSON PL/SQL library as part of their Apex 5. And then as I mentioned, if you're on database 12.102 and you have the JSON feature set up, you can use that for parsing it as well. And if you're going to be doing that, the way to get the entire contents of what's being posted in is you use the :body. It's an implicit bind variable that's always there, and it gives you the entire body untouched as a blob. So the PL/JSON, I believe, needs a clob, so you'd have to do a quick blob to clob conversion, and then you'd be able to parse it from there. And then the last way to get bind variables in is you can reference anything from a header. So if it's in the header, you can map it to a bind variable. Here, I'm using a custom header called chunk number. Just I did a quick example. I'll show you, although it's not working. The hosting people I'm using for it doesn't work for some reason. But we basically set a custom header, and that custom header goes into this bind variable, and then you can reference it as normal inside your PL/SQL block. So you could get custom headers, you can get referrers, you could get user agents, you could get any of those information from a header. The RESTful auto enablement we talked about. So now the other piece of the RESTful enablement that we didn't mention is it's great to get a full list of your employees, but what if you only want to subset that employees? Like, say you only want employees that are not Smith. So we want everyone but Jeff. You can pass a Q question mark. This is all in the 3.0 doc on how to do this. You can pass a Q question mark. You say ename not equals a Smith. We can do the opposite, and we can say we only want Smith, and it will come back with just Smith. So there, we wrote 0 lines of code. What we're doing internally is we parse this predicate, basically, and create a SQL version of it, and then we filter down what you want and return that to you. Some other examples of that.
Since you're excluding me, I'm going to interrupt for a second. Is that predicate, the way you defined it, is that part of the JSON standard we're doing here? So you could use that same syntax other places?
Yeah. So yes and no. So part of so Jeff's question is basically, can I lift this syntax and use it, say, in Fusion apps or middleware? So the answer is partially. So some of the groups have similar syntax, some don't. This part is one of those, as all standards are, heavily debated topics, and there's no consensus yet. But if we look through some of the other examples, so here we can say we want the salary where it's greater than 1,000 and less than 4,000. We want where the ename is equal to Smith or King, right? So we can do any number of ands and ors. Some of the things that's not normal for JSON, I guess is a good way to say it, is in JSON, if something doesn't exist, it's just not present. So we have a not null operator, and we have a null operator. So you can say, show me only the records where ename's a bad example, but maybe where commission's null. So show me everyone that's not commission-based, things like that. There's a between operator. So you can say, show me everything between null and 2,000 or 1 and 2,000. You can do the same operations with date functions. You can do in strings, not in strings, likes, right? So we're taking all the things that you can do in the database and RESTfully enabling them. The other thing that's in here is there's an as of function. So for anyone that's familiar with database flashback, if you have flashback enabled, you can say as of. So give me all the employees as of a certain SCN or as of a date. So if you want to see from the database flashback enabled, show me all the records from yesterday, you can do that as well, along with all the other normal operators. So you can say show me all the employees from yesterday that are named Smith versus how many do I have today named Smith. So this slide here has not a full list, but a pretty good list. So, right, we have equals, greater than, less than, not less, or less than or equals, greater than or equals, not equals, in strings, and then all the other ones that we were talking about is null, not null, like, not like, all those come in here as well. And there's a few more examples there. And here, oh, I didn't mention, it also does order bys. So you can actually order by as well. So if you wanted to filter and sort, you can do all of that without ever doing anything more than right-clicking in SQL Dev and saying restfully hook me up. The Metadata Catalog we talked about, it has all of our objects that are enabled. This is only today for the RESTfully enabled objects. It doesn't count the custom written RESTful calls. That side will get a catalog, just not quite yet. So from there, we just have a few more examples. So let's go back to more examples. So maybe this is going to work. This is the one where my hosting company wasn't working. So I don't know, there's probably better ones, but I've been using this JS bin for doing a lot of examples, and it was working fine. But this is the one where I'm basically creating custom HTTP headers. So the concept here is I am picking a file. I'm using the HTML5 file commands to read the file, get the name of the file, get the dates of the file, get the size of the file. And the reason for this is I want to be able to have it upload in chunks. So maybe you know, doing one batch upload of a 5 meg file. If you break it into 5 individual pieces, they can parallelize, they can do anything like that. And this is where it's been breaking on me. But we upload, I'm getting this is the actual error, so if someone knows how to fix this, let me know, but I'm getting a controls not allowed for null.json.bin origin, cross-origin support. But basically what happens then is we pass this in, we're passing in one chunk at a time, and then we can come over here back into Apex and look at what we're doing. So here we defined all those new custom headers. We defined them into bind variables. We take and use those bind variables. And for demo purposes, I'm very lazy, so I only have one file of any given name in my table. I have a simple little table that has a blob and a file name. And here I'm going to append that chunk of data that came in. If for some reason that file doesn't already exist, I'm going to just do an initial insert, and then I'll write the status back. So there's an example of passing in headers, converting them to binds, and then using those in PL SQL. Does anyone have any questions? Put them in the chat window, and we can get to those. There's other examples on my blog, like here's the cursor support. It's literally the example we ran, where we have the tables, the columns, the indexes. If we look through, if you go through, there's a bunch of different examples out there. is another example of what we're doing internally using ORDS. So inside Oracle, there's a corporate lookup directory, and this is completely HTML5 based. Even the images are served up over REST. So if we look at the image itself, same structure, same everything that normally exists for our REST calls. So here our module is called images. We have a RESTful endpoint called thumb large, and then we pass it my name, and we get back an image of me with the dogs. So it doesn't have to be JSON that you're supporting, that you're retrieving over REST. It can actually be anything. And I think that's about all I was going to talk about. So I don't know. What do you normally do now, Jeff? Do you unmute people or?
Yeah, I can unmute the lines, and I can stop the recording too, so people can ask questions without having the rest of the world hear it at some point. So just give me a second.